Hey everyone. So I thought I would discuss part of my main work. For the last few months, I've worked as a nightclub photographer at a local club, Harlem, part of the collective. Now I started off working with Wild Ones, and since then I've moved on. I've worked with Harlem themselves on Saturday nights, really busy nights, and also on Thursday nights when they've got events. Most recently, a Lou party. So a lot of people, when they're looking at clubs, are kind of, oh no, it's really dark. How are you going to set your camera? And they kind of get bogged down by it and become scared of it in some ways. So I thought I'd go over kind of what my approach is. From what I've read up on it myself, there is no definitive right or wrong. People have their own ideas of what they do. They have their own settings, and it just kind of depends on what you're going with and what the club's like that you're working in, and how dark it is, and stuff like that. Um, and this tutorial, I'm going to talk about the camera settings, and I'm going to do another tutorial later on, which will be a proper video tutorial, so you get to see me. And I'm going to discuss about the speed lights that I've used. I've used two kinds of speed lights, you see, and I want to discuss about a little bit about both, because one's a lot cheaper than the other one, and it shows you how you can start out. So this image that you can see is of a couple of regulars at the club. I speak to them every week. Always a good laugh and always wanting their photos taken. And you can see that straight away it's bright, so I've obviously got the settings right in regards to my speed light. This is taken with my newer speed light, which is easier because it uses ETTL. And as you can see, the background is the background can be seen. You can see parts of it, you can see the colours from it, so it's worth. Obviously the camera settings are good. I've got other ones which the backgrounds are better, but I'm using this one because I know these people, I'm sure they won't mind the images being used. So camera settings, rule number one, I always work in manual. Doesn't matter where the scene is, I want to make sure that I've got full control over what the camera's doing. If I put it into aperture, it's going to start messing around with shutter speeds, and I want to keep a good shutter speed, quite a slow shutter speed as well. Also, by working in manual, I can choose the aperture. Now the aperture is going to be very much dependent on the type of lens that you use. I will be investing in a newer lens, but the one that I'm using just now, basically I can only work to a minimum of 5.6 f-stop. A lot of people recommend working around the 2.8 to 3.5 f-stop when you're working in clubs, maybe up to 4. There are some occasions for the 5.6 to be used, but I've got to work with what my restrictions are, and that's the best way to approach when you're doing any kind of photography. Is look at what your restrictions are, not look at, oh, what do I need to get the best result, but what have you got now, and how can you make the best of what you've got just now. So manual mode definitely, which we'll just talk about my main settings in a moment. The other thing that you need to look at is your white balance and your ISO. So we'll talk about ISO first. You want something, depending on your camera, you want something that's good but doesn't give you too much noise. On my camera I can get away with an ISO of around 800. I could go slightly lower or slightly higher, but 800 I find works really well. As you can see from the image, there's not a lot of noise. It comes out very clean. So at 800 I'm getting a good result. On from there, then, as I mentioned before, for aperture settings, 5.6 is my limit for the lens I've got just now. I am looking at investing in a lens that just covers a different range and with a different f-stop. At the moment, the lens I'm using is my standard portrait lens, which is an 18 to 105. In a club, really what I'm looking to get is something in the region of 18 or lower, up to around 50, some in that region. That should be enough for working in the club, so I'll be looking out for new lenses. So far then we've talked about ISO 800, aperture 5.6. Next one to look at is white balance, and I always use flash as my white balance. I like the colour tones. I think it gives the best from the image personally, but you may want to play around with it, use auto, or try and see what the results are that you're getting, and if you like the results that you're getting. So those settings are all definite. whenever I walk into the club, those are the ones I do not change at any stage of my shooting. When I'm moving from section to section, they stay the same. The only thing that I vary to allow for the ambient light, and if you've done photography for a while, you'll understand that the best way to control it is through your shutter speed. I will generally work with a shutter speed of 1/10 of a second. That would be kind of my fastest shutter speed. I will not go much faster than that because I don't feel the need to. I like to get a little bit of blur coming into the background. There are occasions where I'll take it down to about a third of a second, sometimes even to half a second, things like that. And it depends on what I'm shooting. If I want to get a nice background where say they've got the strobe lights going and they've got the in this case they've got the green laser type lights going all over the place, I want to create like a blur effect with it, I'll slow the shutter speed right down. In some situations where the people will stand still, you can get away with going down to a 1 second shutter speed and really blurring out that background, bringing everything through. But generally I find, out of experience, people, especially in the clubs and especially when they're drinking and they're dancing around, they're not going to stand still. So most times I'm going to get away with about an 1/8 to a 1/10 of a second shutter speed. If I go to a well lit area, I might bump that up slightly because there'll be enough ambient light coming through. Again, it just depends on the situation. So to recap on that then, so we've got our white balance for flash, our shutter speed of around a 1/10 of a second, if not slower, depending on what I'm shooting. My aperture is 5.6, and my ISO is 800. And really that is the camera settings I use. I don't adjust anything else, leave everything else as it was factory set on the camera. And I said this is one of the results from a shoot last week for the Wild Ones night. And the quality, as far as I'm concerned, and from what I gather as far as the client's concerned, is fine. It's brilliant because it's what they're looking for. They want to see the people having fun. And so that's basically your camera settings.